Today is the 26th of October. I'm Don Smith, the pastor at Southside, here with Brother Roy Proffitt. And Roy is one of the original members at Southside, was involved in the creation and development of the church. And we're here at Southside today to talk about his experiences many years ago when the idea first occurred to build a new church or develop a new church at that time. And Brother Roy, tell us a little bit about you and your history and where you were born and grew up and all of that.
Well, I was born in Sevier County, just a short distance from here, and went to school in the Gatlinburg-Pittman school back then, and later to Cosby School, graduated from Cosby High School, and I've lived most of my life right in this part of the country. But I've been active in church work, I guess, most of my life. I was a church training director here in Cobb County for 8 years prior to my becoming interested in this mission field here. I guess the idea of First Baptist Church creating another mission, the last mission they started was English Creek, and from Newport to English Creek there was no other churches there. There's a space of a few miles there just wasn't any churches. And I guess with the opening of Indian Hills subdivision here, English Hills, Green Acres, and golf course, and then also the housing development here, there was a tremendous amount of homes that there just was no church area to be involved in. So I guess a lot of us people felt like it'd be good to have a church in this area.
The kids programs here at Southside have been really strong, yes, and a blessing for the kids in the neighborhood. And we've talked about how over the years their parents have not really come in and participated, but those children have. And I know over the years many of those children have been led to the Lord. And those kids otherwise probably would not have been in church or exposed to church or otherwise had an opportunity to hear the gospel. And I think one of the great blessings of Southside is that's been an important part of who this church is. Again, Roy, going back to that original Sunday school group, do you remember who had that first idea, where you first heard about it or heard it discussed?
Frank Gorman was the teacher of that class.
Okay.
And he was pretty instrumental in getting things going. Don Meredith, who was a highway patrolman, he was interested in it and took a pretty big hand in getting it all started.
And his wife Bonnie is still in our congregation and
still in our congregation, and I guess teaches a class
and makes the most amazing pecan pie I think I've ever eaten. It's really good. But that's interesting. The other men that are mentioned are Charlie Creasy and Richard Williams and W.C. Vinson Jr. and Jim Masters, Charlie Runyon and the Runyon family, and Claude Balch and Howard Gandy and Bob Edwards are the ones that were mentioned in that original crew. Now, I think you told me that when Southside started, about half the class members came over, and then you all had planned to switch back and forth.
That's sort of the plan, we didn't want to just wear one person out.
Right. Right.
But really, the switching never did take place. The people that come and started it seemed like they didn't want to go away.
They
just
enjoyed
stayed
it.
with
Yeah, they were so. I think they were so blessed, and I think too. It's just the following the Lord's guidance and the Lord's leadership is always a blessing to us.
Right.
And when we find ourselves in that position in our lives, we don't want to stop. We want to just keep going.
Right.
And I was thinking about. Can you tell us a little bit about what you all did? I'm thinking about people who might be thinking about a church plant or an idea that, how do you start a church? What did you men do to help it get going?
Well, I guess one of the first things we tried to do was find a location
Okay.
and see if we could purchase it.
Uh-huh.
So the class did find a lot adjacent to the church building we have now.
Okay.
And we purchased that lot, and one of the ladies from First Baptist Church, I think, let us have the money, and
Is
we
that
paid
right?
her back. But
Uh-huh.
it all worked out pretty swiftly.
Uh-huh.
And we got it paid off. Actually, we started a building back on that lot,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the guys in that subdivision down there sued us, said we let some water run into his house or something. I don't know.
Oh, my
Anyway,
goodness. Yeah.
we backed out on finishing the building there, even though we could have. We had authority from housing.
To go ahead with the
Yeah,
church.
to go ahead with it.
Right.
But anyway,
Right.
we stopped, and Mr. Joe Cocker, I don't know if you remember,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
he got into the act, and he came and talked to Charlie and Ophis Bryant, which owned the two lots that our building is on now.
Okay.
And to tell you the truth, I don't know whether they gave us the lots or whether the First Baptist Church paid something for them, but the people in the Sunday school class out here did not
Right.
get involved in payment for these two
Okay.
lots.
So the church backed up the project at
Right.
that point. Yeah.
And
That's great.
Mr. Joe, he didn't give up easy on anything, so
Right.
so he worked and got the property and got it set up to build a building on this lot here.
Right. Well, that's great. 'Cause the lot is still owned by the church, which was the original plan to build it, and it's a lot lower than the lot that the church actually sits on. It drops down quite a bit, and it would have been a much less desirable site for the church building.
Right.
And I'm always amazed that in projects they sometimes don't go according to plan; they go according to the Lord's plan. And he obviously had a plan in getting you all involved initially, and then part of his plan was not to have the original location work out.
I guess that's
Although
right.
it does provide a nice buffer for the back of the church, and it is a nice sort of green space back there behind the church. As you're getting things up and operating, you're interested in finding pastor. Did you all act as preachers and song leaders and Sunday school teachers as the church was getting going?
Well, the way the church got organized when we first came out, Doug Vinson accepted the job as a Sunday school superintendent.
Okay.
And well, I'll just mention them now. Lita Ratcliffe came as one of the adult women teachers, and Margie Overholt came as another one, and Ms. Ratcliffe later transferred back, but Ms. Overholt always stayed with us.
Is that right?
She stayed on here until her death. So.
Wow. Well, that's great. When the first church meetings started to happen, where did you all locate? Where did the church originally start meeting?
We started meeting in the housing project office complex. At that time, they had a complex here that had a maintenance area and several offices all together. So there was quite a bit of room there.
Okay.
The men met in where the lawnmowers and things were kept, because everybody hurried to get there first.
Like the utility shed or
lawnmower
something. So that was the most comfortable place to sit, probably on the lawnmower seat. So that's great. And were there about 6 of you that were coming at that time at the very beginning?
Yeah, six or 7.
Uh-huh. And then did you have folks starting to come in from the projects or from Indian Hills at all? Or?
Well, we at that time there was 5 elderly ladies live in I guess you'd call it a condo complex. There was about 5 or 6 areas together.
Okay.
The Richard Williams that you mentioned earlier, him and his family lived in the first one, I believe, and then these 5 women lived adjacent.
Okay. Wow.
All in separate condos.
Right.
But they come as, I guess, I don't know just how long they did come, but for most of them, I guess they come the rest of their lives.
Is that right? Well, I'm sure that was a blessing to them.
Yes.
And because they otherwise weren't going to church probably, or able to go. And it's interesting how the projects work out. Usually when you start a project like this, you're going to run into problems, and you mentioned the problem of the location when you all were starting to think about building, where you're going to build and so forth. Do you remember as it's a milestone, I think, when a new church begins that building process, when you start to build your own building? And do you remember kind of how that developed and what was going on at that time?
Well, it took quite some time. I don't remember now. Seemed to me like it was about 6 or 7 years from the time we started till we started on the building. There was a lot of back and forth work went into that. Mr. Vinson's son was an architect, and he and his firm developed these plans for us. And I don't think that we didn't deviate much from the plan that they gave us.
Yeah. Well, people are always surprised when they come in and they see, because it's a different looking architecture than any of the other mission churches that were built. Of course, English Creek is an old stone building, very beautiful, sort of traditional old mountain stonework, and Riverview and Northport of course, are more traditional looking churches. And Southside was built by I understand, the same architectural firm that built the community center. Don Shell and Doug Vinson's son were in that architectural firm. And so at first, when you saw it, it didn't from the outside look necessarily like a church, did it?
Not too much.
But it's a beautiful church, and people are always surprised when they walk through the doors and they come in and they say, "This is so beautiful." One of the things that I was so impressed with at Southside is how good the sound is. There's lots of natural wood in the auditorium, and it looks like it was designed by musicians, basically, for music, because it's perfect for sound. Really good. Were there now your first pastor at that time? How did you all go about calling a pastor when the church first started?
We decided this time we had a preacher of our own out here.
Who was doing the preaching, or most of the preaching?
We didn't have any very much. Once in a while, somebody from Southside, from First Church would come out, but that's basically it. Actually, when we started looking for a pastor, I had a rental house, and lo and behold, I was renting to a preacher that had been to Southwest Seminary in Texas, and he'd come back here for some reason and was not finishing up his seminary. Anyway, I told the church about him, and so we had him over and preached, and they liked him. So we just elected him.
Well, that's neat. That fell into place.
And he served for, I don't know, couple, maybe 3 years, not more than 3.
Well, that's interesting. And how about the financial stability of the church? Were you all able to generate enough funds to kind of begin to think about a building program?
Really, money has just never been a real big problem for Southside. Seemed like if a need came up, we always had something to take care of.
Something, yeah. And I think that's one of the marks of when God is at work. He provides. When He calls people to serve Him, He makes the means available, and it certainly had a powerful effect in terms of the lives that were being influenced. I think about your lives, of all of you all who stepped out. I know it's very comfortable to be in a Sunday school class at a big church, and where things are happening and you have a lot of fellowship, and to leave that behind is kind of what we do as Christians. We move out, we start and respond to God's call, and I think you all did that. And I think God has blessed and sort of protected. It's had its difficulties over the years, as all churches do. Sometimes there are financial difficulties, and God has blessed that Southside really has not struggled in that way. But every church faces challenges, and there are always issues. Churches are like families, aren't they?
Yeah, and, we have to live within our means.
That's right, we do. That's exactly right. Well, I just find it really interesting to think about those early days, and now as you all got the property, and then you selected an architectural firm that was kind of connected. Mr. Vincent Dubb himself was involved in the creation of the church. Just happened to have an architect's son. That was convenient, and not only were they available, but they were really good too. And I know that Mr. Vincent's son, and I know Don Shell, both architects, and they're both excellent. And so the Lord really blessed by bringing them along. It wasn't just a matter of convenience, but He gave you two really good designers. And then recently, in the last couple of years, we've added a steeple to the church, which has sort of made it look like more like a church, that people would say, well, now where's the church? I know that building, but what is that? So Richard Harwood made a generous donation to help us put the steeple on the church, and now there's no question about what the building is about. But it still remains, I think, one of the prettiest churches in the interior of Southside. Is always a blessing to me when I come in. It's just a beautiful church, and you all make good decisions. That, the interesting thing about this church and the architecture of it is it always looks new. It looks modern, and it's been here since the 1980s. So that's 40 years ago that this building was built. But it looks like it could have been built last week, doesn't it? I mean, it really has just a very, very kind of timeless design to it. Really is a beautiful place. Of course,
we did redo the back portion,
That's right. Right.
And made it more palatable.
Yep. And I think Eddie Ball was involved in the building of that. His dad was a pastor here in the area. In fact, he built my wife and I built our first home for us here. Eddie's dad, and Eddie added on to our house out there. But Eddie's been really helpful and generous, and as many others have, in terms of helping with the creation of Southside. Do you remember the first service in the new building? You were telling me it was kind of hazy back there, but
Yeah, a little bit.
yeah.
One thing I remember about it, there's a lot of us people walking around with a lot of pride showing, I guess.
I guess so. Yeah, yeah,
I'd say that's the biggest thing I recall from it.
right.
Of course.
Yeah,
I think rightfully so. I think we had a right to be proud.
do too. Yeah, yeah. To see Southside and to think about that from coming to fruition within just a few years, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite extraordinary. And you talked about the first pastor, and then as the church got up and running, you had a Sunday school program that was going. You had Deb had served as the first Sunday school superintendent and so forth. And then, did you see growth in the church in those early days with the new building?
It didn't, actually, it didn't take off like we expected.
Mm-hmm.
But we did see just sort of steady growth, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Of course, Richard Williams, we talked about it. He was awful impatient about getting a new building.
Uh-huh.
But, I guess he's willing to wait for the building that he actually saw.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
He was really proud of it too.
I'm sure. Well, it's such a beautiful church. It really is, and I think it's when you walk inside, there's a sense of quiet peace here in the sanctuary that's unforgettable. And then the church members that are now in heaven were so important in developing the church. And you talk about being proud of what they'd accomplished here on earth. I'm sure that they are really proud because they can see. We can only see a limited picture of the effects or the results of Southside, but many of them can see the bigger picture and the souls that have been won to the Lord through this ministry. You know, when you think about Southside, Roy, you've seen it grow and develop, go through good seasons, go through hard seasons, maybe go through real blessings and real challenges, things that were very hard and difficult. And in your view, what has been the thing that has kept Southside going, even when it's had really difficult challenges?
I think the one thing is the commitment that people have to the Lord's work and seeing that it's carried out the way it should be.
I'm really glad you said that, because becoming a Christian and affiliating with the church that the Lord leads you to, it's like a marriage. It's a commitment. And there are always opportunities to leave or always opportunities to quit. But I think when the Lord leads us into something, He asks us for a commitment to that. And if you guys had known all the ups and downs that you were going to go through over the years, I think you probably would have still kept that commitment, because I hear that there was a really strong blessing at first for the people who launched out. There is the other thing I think about, in addition to commitment here, is that there's a real sense of family and a real sense of people love each other at Southside. They really care about one another. And I know if people are out of church for a Sunday or two, somebody's going to be getting in touch with them not to pressure them to be in church, but to find out if they're okay. And there's a real love and affection in this church that really you find in a good family.
And we seem to always have fun with things. I remember one occasion, I think it'd be all right to include it in this, between Frank Gorman and Don Meredith. Of course, Don was a highway patrolman, and a lot of Sundays he'd come by and leave his offering all the time. He come by this one Sunday and left his offering, and Frank said something to him about, "Well, Don, I guess you're off to work today then." And Don said, "No," said, I'm not off to work today. Said, I'm leaving on vacation today. And Frank just said back to him, said, Don said, tell me something. Said, how can you tell when you're on vacation and when you're not?
Yeah, that's a
So that's the type of fun that we've had down through the years.
Yeah, and you got to be good friends to do that,
Right,
you know.
yeah.
And that was one of the things when I was coming as the interim pastor and just doing supply, and then as your interim here at Southside, I noticed the men, the older men, tend to get together once a month or so before COVID, and would eat out, and there was always a lot of that kind of kidding and a lot of joking around and having a lot of happy fellowship with one another. Really enjoyed that. So, Roy, are there any other things that you'd like to tell us about Southside that maybe, you know, we might not have thought of, or any other ideas that you'd like to record?
Well, I'd have to say Southside has really been a wonderful blessing in my life. To start with, before the mission came about over here, Interstate 40 came through, and where I was living, I was going to Cave Hill Baptist Church. And when the interstate come through, it cut the road to the church off.
You couldn't walk over there anymore,
no.
could you?
Anyway, we had to drive 5 or 6 miles around to get back around to the church.
Right.
So I was looking for sort of a different place, you know, and this idea just came along. So Southside has really been a blessing to me on that, from that standpoint. Now, I've not been able to be at Southside all these years in between due to job status. I've had a couple or 3 job changes that had to move around a little. But always managed to get back.
Well, we're sure glad you did. And you've been a real blessing to me, and always, I know most Sundays you're here, some Sundays, you know, you may be a little bit under the weather and not able to come, but I'm always thrilled when I see you and your son or daughter-in-law walk through the back door, and I'm so glad to see Roy's here today. But it's such a blessing. We were talking at lunch about, you know, how we remember big events in our lives, and we can both remember where we were when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. We're both old enough. I'm a little bit behind you, but not much. And then where we were on 9/11 and so forth. And do you remember that Sunday after 9/11 when I know I was at First Baptist here, and it just filled up. People really rushed to go to church. And the uncertainty of that. Do you remember that time period after 9/11?
I just vaguely. I couldn't recall too many instances that happened on that Sunday, but
Well, it's interesting. They're ups and downs, and one of the challenges I think that we face going forward after COVID is to get the church back, you know. But this is a special time, I think, really too, historically. It's a time when maybe Christianity isn't respected as it was when Southside was built and formed.
Well, probably not. It's difficult to visit people and interest them in talking about the Lord and church. That's just not uppermost in their minds most of the time.
No, it's not. And very often people tell me, and they probably tell you as well, many people that I talk to about coming to church, I'll say, well, do you feel like, you know, there would be something at church for you? And they'll say, yes, I know I need to go to church. And especially young parents will tell me that they don't want to go, but they want their children to go. And I always try to let them know that their children are going to do pretty much what they do. And if they're not interested or church is not a priority, then it won't be for their children either. I think back on these markers, that we've gone through. We've gone through a lot of the historical changes and so forth, and Southside has been in existence, in this building for roughly 40 years now, and all the social changes that have come about and things that we've seen in the last 10 or 20 years that really represent a change in society. But when you all were first getting started, you had the church building really pretty soon after the church was formed. Usually it takes 10 or 15, 20 years before a church is financially able to actually even think about building. And the Lord really blessed this pretty quickly with this place. And
I don't remember now just exactly how many years it was before we paid it off, but it wasn't very many.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing photographs of the burning of the mortgages. They did that a lot, yeah. Now you have to keep those records for your it's mostly a ceremony.
Yeah.
Well, Roy, I sure appreciate you talking to us about this today, and as you recall more, are there other things we can talk again about it? And again, I just really appreciate you so much, and you're such a blessing to this church. And again, this church exists because people like you made sacrifices, made choices, and made commitments and stuck with them. And it's a challenge to, I think, our younger people coming up to make that same kind of commitment and to
they find it difficult to do, and it is sometimes.
It is.
But there's blessings along the way if you do it.
There are, yeah. Well, you're sure a blessing to us. Well, God bless you, my brother Roy, and thank you so much for these remarks. And anything else you want to talk about before we close?
Well, no, I can't think of anything right at the moment, but if something else comes up, you'll be happy to.
Okay, very good. We know how to set it up, so we can do it. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate you doing this. God bless you.
Thank you.